Welcome to Ray-ality TV. I'm Raymond Bakari. This is a little bit of a special episode because it's going to be a 2022 election analysis. We're a little later because it's a little over a week after, but we wanted to make sure all the results, as much as the results have been counted so far, and to make sure that we have everything we could talk about, ranging from national to congressional races in Rhode Island, all the way to local, and maybe even look at what 2024 has in store for Rhode Island. It's actually perfect timing too, because we kind of have a bit of that in mind for 2024. So I'm joined by Ryan Lukowicz, who hosts the Behind the Candidates podcast. You can find it on Spotify, Apple, Spreaker, wherever you get your podcasts. So there's also going to be the audio version of this episode on his. We're going to do the dual upload like we did with our Senate District 35 debate. I don't know how it's going to show when I'm on the screen after on YouTube, but to my left is David Rudolph, who is in the URI class of 2024. He is very politically engaged, as everybody on the Zoom call. He's going to be representing more of the left-leaning point of view. On the bottom right is Anthony Delana, who is representing the right-leaning kind of point of view, and he was most recently a field organizer for the Rhode Island GOP. And on the bottom left of my screen is Ryan. Him and I are going to be moderating this, kind of providing that independent centrist / moderator kind of view, just to make sure we have a balance of everything. David, I'll start with you for the audio version, just to say your name and put a voice to the name.
Yeah, so I'm David. As Raymond just said, I'm a URI student graduating 2024. I've been involved in campaigns in the past, and then just generally, really interested in politics, because you could call me an election nerd. So,
Anthony.
Hi, I'm Anthony Delana. I was most recently a field organizer for the Rhode Island Republican Party. And I'm more right-leaning, and I go to Bishop Hendricken.
And Ryan, your listeners are familiar with your voice, but as a just in case, just to put a voice with the name.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Raymond, for that great introduction. My name is Ryan Lukowicz. I am currently a junior at North Kingstown High School and a podcast host. And I look forward to this great conversation we're going to have about a lot. Hopefully we can cover plenty of ground here with all of the elections, and there's a lot to get into.
There absolutely is, Brian. Anthony, I'll start off with you. So nationally, in your opinion, what happened?
Nationally, it was definitely, I wouldn't say a defeat for the Republicans, but it was definitely not the red wave we were expecting and were hoping for. I think one of our biggest problems was Republicans just didn't go out to vote. I think we need, focusing on the 2024, we're already starting here at the Rhode Island Republican Party. We're already starting candidate recruitment. We're already starting to build up organizations and trying to get Republicans excited for the 2024 election. But we're also focusing on the ballot harvesting. I think ballot harvesting was a big advantage that the Democrats do have. And I think Republicans do need to work on ballot harvesting and just basically their image. I think we need to show a new brand for the Republican Party that appeals to Gen Z and the younger voter, because I don't want to say that the Democrats bought the younger vote, but by promising them college debt relief, it did, in fact, I think it incentivize them to vote more left-leaning. And then don't get me if I'm wrong, I think it was the day after a court in Texas did say that it was unconstitutional and took away the bill. Am I right, Raymond, with that? I think it was the day after.
I believe it was a little shortly after. I don't think it was exactly on November 9th, but you are right, it did happen shortly after.
So I think
I was going to ask, so you mentioned rebranding and Gen Z turnout. What do you think that rebranding should be, since you are in Generation Z?
I think we need to focus on Gen Z and tell them, look, the Democrats lied to you. The Democrats said that college relief was going to be had for all of them, and they lied. They took it away the day after, or if not shortly. I think Gen Z has to realize that the Democrats aren't there to help them. They lied. They took away the college funds, and they have to see that things are more important than just their college. Look at the gas prices. Gas prices are rising again. The war in Ukraine. There's a lot of problems, not just foreign, but in our country, that needs to be solved. And I think it's the Democrat leadership that needs to be, they need to be held accountable. I know everyone says Joe Biden's not the problem, but if Trump was president or we had a different Republican president, I believe that we would not have these issues that we are faced today.
Let's tie you in on this, David. What happened, and if you want to add on to the Gen Z turnout?
Yeah. So, I mean, before we go into what happened, I'd just like to address the student debt relief. I mean, Democrats did not take away the student debt. A conservative judge who was probably appointed by a Republican president ruled the student debt relief unconstitutional. So if anything, it's the Republicans that took away college debt from Gen Z. But as far as the recent midterm we had, I think the best way to describe it would be a red ripple to neutral year. I mean, the House was a slight Republican takeover, but they're likely to have as much or even less seats than what the Democrats have had for the last 2 years, which is an extremely thin majority, around 220 seats. A likely 1-seat pickup in the Senate. So what we're looking at is a similar, case as to what happened after 2018, where, one party took over the House, but the president is going to be able to do a lot of things with the Senate. He's going to be able to ram through a lot of judges. He's going to be able to get any cabinet nominations he wants through. Biden is not going to be able to codify Roe or pass any more social spending packages without substantial bipartisan support. I think it really goes down to the impact of Roe being overturned and, former President Trump's insistence to stay in the spotlight. In just about every competitive race, an election denier Trumpy kind of candidate that ran lost. In Arizona, Kerry Lake lost. In Pennsylvania, Dr. Oz lost. In Wisconsin, the Republican candidate lost to the Democratic Governor Tony Evers. And even in states where the election deniers won, or the more Trump style candidates won, it was in extremely red terrain where you wouldn't expect a Democrat to win. So I think it's a clear repudiation of extremism that we've seen from the right, particularly with taking away, what was believed to be a constitutional right for almost 50 years, and the fact that Donald Trump won't really stay quiet and admit that he clearly lost in 2020.
Anthony, do you think I was going to ask, do you think candidate quality and the overturning of Roe had an effect?
It did, but David, I would like to go back to what you said about the court, how it was appointed by, you said it was probably appointed by President Trump. I would like to say
Trump or Bush or Reagan or Republican president.
There was a way that Biden wouldn't have to go from the courts. I forget what it was called, but there was a way that Biden did not take it that way. He took it by the way that the courts could deny it. And honestly, I think he wanted it to be overturned, in my opinion.
David, you want to respond?
Yeah, I mean, without getting too into the details of what Joe Biden's mind thinks, I find it very hard to believe that Biden purposely promised, $10,000 off of student loans just to have it, turned over by the court. It seems a little far-fetched to me. I'll leave it to, the viewers and our own individual selves to believe, either me or Anthony. But yeah, it seems like the student loan relief was a genuine attempt by Biden to both fulfill a campaign promise that he ran on in 2020 and also, give younger voters and even middle-aged and older voters who have college debt a reason to vote for the Democrats, which, as Anthony, he described it as bribing, but it's bribery in the same way that fulfilling any campaign promise is bribery.
David, there was also a bit of I know nationally, it wasn't the red wave like 2014 saw or even 2010, but I noticed interestingly enough, in states like California and New York, the Republicans kind of shocked everybody. Imagine telling somebody in 2022 that New York would be closer than, say, for example, the Senate race in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that, in deep blue terrain where the threat of the court decision didn't have as much of an effect, because obviously abortion is legal in New York, I think, there was just less of anxiety of Democrats to get out and vote in New York. And the Republicans in New York really got their stuff together. It's clear that, I have this kind of theory that there were a lot of Republicans in New York that tend not to vote in most elections because they don't think that their vote's going to matter because New York is so blue. I think a lot of them came out this year because Lee Zeldin at the top of the ticket gave them like the inspiration that, oh, maybe this is the year that we flip New York. It didn't happen. It was close, but, you know, Hochul ended up beating Zeldin. But the coattails of Zeldin in New York and the coattails of Republican candidates in California and the coattails of DeSantis in Florida show that, yes, there were some states where there was a clear red wave.
There's also a lot of Republicans asking for Lee Zeldin to run for RNC chair from what I've seen in the news recently. Anthony, I'll just ask you this, and I'm going to tie in Ryan in a second. Do you think Lee Zeldin should make the jump for RNC chair?
I would say he could. Totally. I don't know if he'd get support from the entire GOP, but I could definitely see a run for that seat. I'm interested to see what David has to say about that, though.
Yeah, all right. And I'll let David really respond, then I want to get Ryan in on this.
Yeah, quick. I noticed that Ronna Romney McDaniel, the current RNC chair, already released some letters from a majority of people that would elect the chair. So even if Zeldin runs, I don't think he would be able to take out McDaniel, but I'll let Ryan get in here.
Yeah, Ryan. So for nationally, what do you think happened? And, you know, anything you want to add to the national topic?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, Roe v. Wade being overturned, of course, made Democrats very unhappy. But I think it was the best thing to motivate their voters to go out this election cycle. And I think what it shows is people don't like extremes and they don't like change. And what I mean by that is, you know, people see President Trump and his allies as far to the right. And you know, so some of the you know, policies that have been floated, such as you know, cutting Social Security or you know, Medicaid and so on and so forth, you know, kind of scared the senior citizens, and absolutely Gen Z you know, played a big part in it too. And I'm sure, I mean, any you know person in their late teens or 20s is happy about that student debt relief, and President Biden came through on that campaign promise. And you know, but it is what it is, and now you know, it's not, I don't look at it as bribing. I just look at it as, you know, he wanted to do something to you know, try to give some relief, and maybe there could be other ways to do it. But the other thing is, you know, we've seen this before with, you know, one chamber, if you will, being controlled by Democrats and the other Republicans, the Senate and House respectively. But, you know, the President Biden's legislative agenda is definitely going to be pretty much at a standstill because of that. And, you know, I think you can just expect a lot of status quo, you know, from Congress over these next 2 years, and you know, that will kind of prevail. So I don't think, you know, we're definitely not going to see, you know, a national abortion ban or a codifying of Roe v. Wade from Congress.
There's certainly going to be a lot more partisan gridlock going on in DC, which is funny because there was some senators that even retired because of all the partisan gridlock in DC, and now some of those who have got elected are just going to continue it. And one last thing I want to add for the RNC chair, I noticed David on that list. No, there was nobody from Rhode Island. Anthony, did you find that interesting too, that we don't have any Rhode Island people on that list?
Well, I think everyone from Rhode Island, we just want to change Rhode Island. We are very focused on the state of Rhode Island, and we already started for 2024. We are doing more things than we have in the past. I have talked to many people that have been in the party since 2000, and they said that this election, it just had a different feeling to it. We usually kind of break off during the off years, but we are still meeting. We are still having new ideas. We're still having board meetings. We're still having new leadership come in, and we're still in contact with the RNC. We are trying.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. My bad.
Oh, no. What were you going to say?
No, I was going to say, my bad. For those watching, there's a bit of a delay. So like if he stops for a second, I'm not sure if that's him finishing. So that my apologies in advance for any interruptions. No, go ahead. I was going to transition to the next thing, but I want you to finish.
And I think we are just focused on Rhode Island. And this year was definitely a wake-up call for us. We did see how badly we did lose in Rhode Island. And we definitely thought we were going to do much better than we did. I think we just need new things in place. And I would be interested to see what David would think about that.
I did just want to transition to CD2 because, to your point, one of the big elections that all the chips were put on the table for was CD2. I'm going to let Ryan kind of moderate this part of the topic. So we'll start with Ryan, and then Ryan, if you want to let David go on after. What were your thoughts on the CD2 results?
Yeah, I so many people asked me who would win. I mean, family members, friends, and it was just so hard to tell. And I literally said, you could flip a coin, and even on election night, I had no idea. And you had, some people saying Magaziner was going to win by 10 points, and others saying Fung, and then everything in between. I was curious if this seat, could end up being, a big state recount or decide Congress and what a national story it would be. But at the end of the day, it ended up staying blue. For those who don't know, spoiler alert, Seth Magaziner did end up winning against Alan Fung by, I think, a few points once mail ballots were completed. But I know that he had an incredible ground game. And I was one of those people saying, at first, I don't know if nationalizing the race is necessarily going to resonate with voters. But then in that last debate, which I attended live at Rick, and Raymond, I know you were there too, I think something shifted, maybe just before that debate, about a week to a week and a half before the election, where Seth Magaziner really came out with some fresh new talking points. And he really said that Fung blaming Biden for the inflation was partisan mudslinging, was the quote he kept using. And I thought that was really interesting. And then the whole argument about the big oil companies making so much money and that going into Alan Fung's campaign, I thought was really interesting. I just did a whole podcast episode, which was a monologue as I kick off my election recap series. So I have a whole 17-minute episode on my thoughts on how that race turned out. But at the end of the day, Fung really, tried to, focus on that cost of living issue, but he ended up being on the defensive about abortion, about his time in Cranston. And at the end of the day, he just couldn't, get enough votes. The polls were taken a month before the election. And again, I do think, something happened within those last couple of weeks, looking back. And I can continue moderating this. I'll get David's take, and then we'll go to Anthony, but just kind of 30 seconds or less about what happened. I know I was a little bit long-winded there, but.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I tend to agree with most of what you're saying. I think the polling was always off, though. I mean, when there's a poll showing Seth Magaziner at 37% in a district that Biden won by 15 points, clearly that's not what's really going on. But I think at the end of the day, the election can be summed up by the fact that Alan Fung only won Cranston by 3 points. This is a city that I live in Cranston. I live in Western Cranston, which is, the Fung capital of the world. And at the end of the day, I mean, he was not getting the margins, even in Western Cranston, that he has gotten even against, Governor Raimondo or in his own mayoral races. So the fact that he's not doing well enough in Cranston and is getting, kind of killed in a lot of the more blue suburban areas in South County and just absolutely, crushed in Providence is not a combination to win as a Republican in the 2nd district.
Anthony, I'm sorry that you have to be on the defensive for a lot of this episode as the field director for, or not the field director, but part of the field team for the Rhode Island Republican Party. But what do you think happened to Alan Fung here?
Okay, not to sound like a broken record, but I think it was all branding. I think Alan Fung's first ad put him out. He just was trying to be a nice guy. Look, I'm a Rhode Islander. I'm from Cranston. You saw him with his coffee milk in his hand. Great first ad. I don't think he moved out of that stage. I don't think he got his message out there. And to be totally honest, I don't think he put out as many ads as he should have. I don't know if you guys use YouTube all that much, but I have a younger brother. And he goes on YouTube, and I was talking about Alan Fung, and he was like, "Who's Alan Fung?" And I was like, "Oh, he's running against Seth Magaziner." And he's like, "Seth Magaziner? That's the guy that's all over YouTube. He seems nice." Alan Fung just didn't have, he didn't use, he didn't, I'm not going to say he misused his money, but I think his money, instead of going someplace else, it should have gone into branding himself on YouTube and social media. And that's what I have to say about that race. It was a close race. And in the end, Seth Magaziner did win by, what was it?
4 point.
4 points.
Raymond, any thoughts?
I'm a little bit surprised about the result because if you have Larry Sabato's crystal ball saying that it's a lean R, you would think that it's going to at least be tilt R, but it just didn't go that way. And whether it was the conversations of Roe v. Wade really picking up steam again, or just that was always going to be the top issue, and not that the economy is in rough shape and that gas prices are very high. But to David's point, it's also just fundamentally a blue district. This district is Democratic, even though it has your Burravilles and your Gloucesters and like the parts of Cranston and Warwick that Fung was popular in when he ran for governor. It's just a blue seat. It's tough to beat those odds. But I will say Fung and the Republicans ran a solid campaign. The fact that it was that close, I mean, a little surprised that it didn't flip, but it was a well-run campaign. I can't think of anything that Fung did wrong. He gave the safe answers when it came to the questions like abortion, right to access to abortion, gun control. I don't think the record with Cranston really affected him that much. It might have just been the national environment trickling down. To Anthony's points about the ads, a lot of the negative ads he didn't have to do himself because the GOP's leadership, the Congressional Leadership Fund, the McCarthy Super PAC, whatever it's called, they were spending a lot of money. I live in the district, the Providence part. I was getting a lot of campaign literature, and I'm unaffiliated for the record. I'm an unaffiliated voter. I kept getting a lot of literature from those super PACs and even some from the Rhode Island GOP. I didn't get any literature from Seth, but I guess one more bit of analysis, his ground game made up for that.
Yeah, it did. And David, I'd like to bring you in because you know this better than most. Biden won by, I think it was double digits, and Fung did get a lot of those people who probably voted for Biden over to his side, but at the end of the day, it just wasn't enough. Yeah,
I mean, our current district is basically the same as it was pre-redistricting, but I think it was like 56 to 42 or something like that, somewhere around a 13 to 15 point win for Biden. But about Alan Fung, I mean, if I could just say a little bit about that.
Of course.
I think he was clearly the best candidate that the Republicans could have fielded in this race. But Alan Fung himself has a lot of history in the state, and not all of it is particularly good. I mean, he's always had a history of doing better in the polling than he does on election day. And he has a history of kind of attracting that like soft Democratic vote. And then that soft Democratic vote kind of saying, you know what, I'm going to stick with the person with the D next to their name. And you know, Ray, you pointed out that he had some solid debate performances, but I personally was not seeing the sharp answers that maybe everyone else was seeing. I noticed that like he couldn't really get around how to really answer the abortion question. He never really presented a reason as to why he was against all of these social spending bills that President Biden signed into law that were clearly popular in this district. I mean, it's hard to say I'm against, you know, the Inflation Reduction Act and the American Rescue Plan, but I'm also not against the fact that they gave, you know, residents in the state a $1,400 check. So I think that, you know, a lot of people were open to supporting Fung, but when it came time to really like face the music, they're like, okay, yeah, Seth Magaziner clearly has a plan and a position on these kitchen table issues. And I like Alan, but he doesn't really have, you know, a contrasting platform.
Just one thing about the debates. Ryan is right. The last debate was really Seth's big performance, and a little bit of what you're saying, David. I noticed though in the debates before that, Treasurer Magazine, or Congressman-elect Magaziner, I should say, he did quite a bit of interrupting, and I always think that's a that's not a good look because I mean everybody thought he was trailing Fung, and it was kind of showing because he kept attacking Fung. I always think that when the candidate's attacking, it shows that they're trying to prove something more while Fung was trying to stay in message. And I do disagree just a tiny bit with one of the points you made, because when it came to the abortion question, he simply said, "I'm not going to support a national ban." He can't speak for the whole leadership. I mean, if he tries to tell McCarthy to not do this, they're just going to laugh in his face.
Yeah,
Anthony, I don't
I
know if
mean-
you want to add anything.
Oh,
But-
I would. Like, I think Alan Fung did a great job during the debates. Even in the polling that they did, 70% said that Alan Fung won the debates. I honestly didn't think he was as strong during the debates as Ashley was, but I think his messaging was just off. I think Rhode Island is blue, and I think that the abortion did really hurt his campaign. And McCarthy coming out to support him, I think that might have been the nail in the coffin for him, to be totally honest.
And when he said he didn't support a national abortion ban, I mean, there's a difference between saying, I, as congressman, will not vote to ban abortion nationwide, but he also wouldn't answer the question, do you support states being able to ban them individually? He repeatedly refused to answer that question. And I think that aspect of the abortion question and the abortion issue in general is like why I don't think he properly answered it.
That is true. That's true. I agree with you on that.
I think that Anthony, I'd like your opinion on this. I think that he really was trying to brand himself as the moderate Republican. In Rhode Island, of course, that's needed for anyone with an R next to their name to win. But was he trying to be all things to all people? Because he said he would vote for McCarthy. He wouldn't run away from Trump, but also he clearly wanted to, get those, independent and maybe a few Democratic voters, kind of with him, right?
Well, I think he is a moderate Republican. I think he's always been a moderate Republican. Even when he was running in 2018 against Patricia Morgan for governor in the primary, he was moderate. I think that's why he didn't get a lot of support from the major red areas. And I think that might be the reason why not all Republicans backed him, is because he is too moderate. And he wasn't trying to be, he wasn't trying to win everyone over, because he was moderate even behind. I've talked to Alan many times, and he's moderate even when the cameras aren't on him. He'll tell you how he feels about it, even if it goes against his Republican support.
Yeah, and I was at the polls, and I'll tell you, he was really talking to those voters, and they're both very charming men. I mean, Fung may have shown his personality a little bit more through the campaign, but
Fung is hilarious. He's a great guy. He is one of the funniest people I've ever met. Look at him. He was over at Cranston at the football, waving the flags. Again, the younger support. You see him with the videos. He went to my school, Hendricken. He was over there shaking everyone's hand. Everyone was screaming, "I'm going to vote for you. I'm going to vote for you." Funny enough, they can't vote, but I think that was a waste of his time to go to high school football games when most of the people there can't vote. I think his time could have been spent somewhere else. But I think his personality really showed this campaign. I think even the foodie, he was really branding himself as the foodie. He was over there. I don't eat salad much, but here's Twin Oaks. I'm eating my salad. He really showed his personality in this campaign, and he's like that even when the cameras aren't on.
And that's also a big thing too. Sorry, Ryan. I'll let you jump in just a second. But to Anthony's point, this is what I was talking about with the debates. He didn't give off like an aggressive Republican vibe. If you ask somebody, I mean, obviously a Democrat's going to say Alan Fung is Trump, but he's not. He's a New England Republican, a moderate Republican.
I'm going to be very honest with you. I'm going to be 100% honest. I'm always honest. But in 2018, I did not fully support Alan Fung because he was so moderate. I thought he was too moderate for me. But after this election, I have grown. He has grown on me. And even though he's too moderate for my taste, he's exactly the Republican that Rhode Island needed. And I think Rhode Islanders, after a while, I think they're going to see their mistake, and they should have voted Alan Fung. Alan Fung, he was a great candidate. He's a great person, and he would have been a great congressman.
David, the last word on this?
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to agree that objectively, Alan Fung is a moderate Republican. but a moderate Republican in Rhode Island is still well to the right of the average voter, even the average independent voter. There's a reason why we've elected Democrats consistently, and it's because we're a liberal state. There are a lot of liberals in our district, and they might have even thought like I do. I think Alan Fung is a moderate, like I just said, but I'm a progressive Democrat. I think there are a lot of Democrats that are to the left of me and even to the right of me that also said, yeah, he's a good guy, but I'm still sticking with the Democrats.
Well, I would like to just say something. Blue leadership is why we're one of the worst states to start a small business in. I think the Rhode Islanders one day have to see that if they keep electing consistently blue, because we have no check and balances in this state. If we continue on this path, it's just going to get worse. So I think the voters have to realize that we need some checks and balances in the state.
In the 2022, potential red wave, if that wasn't the year that Democrats, learned a lesson, I don't know what will be, but we'll move on, I guess.
Or I'll let you go, Ryan.
30 seconds or less just to put a bow on this conversation for each of you. I'll start with Raymond. Did Will Gilbert have any impact on this race? Because I know there was a little bit of chatter on election night. He may have taken some votes away from Fung. I mean, in my opinion, it didn't matter, but what is your take?
I think he took an equal amount of number of voters away from both candidates because, moderate party, you probably think like centrist, but he had some ideas that were left leaning. He had ideas that were right leaning. He called out Donald Trump, but his debate performance basically was focused on having a conversation, which I think that appealed to some voters. I don't think it has much of an impact on deciding the race. If you gave Mayor Fung all of Bill Gilbert's votes, it still wouldn't have decided it. To simply put, he took an equal amount from both Magaziner and Fung.
David, Anthony, do you guys agree?
I agree.
I think he had no impact whatever. He got 5,489 votes, and I think he wasn't a player in this race, just the same as Paul Rihanna wasn't a player in the governor's race.
Speaking of the governor's race, let's
good way to transition.
Yeah, exactly.
You're
I was
welcome.
going to use it from your last answer, Anthony, but this one works a bit more. So the governor's race, I don't know if that surprised anybody. The way it sounded like on Twitter versus the way it sounded like off Twitter, it may have surprised some, and may have not surprised others. I thought it'd be at least just a tad bit closer as opposed to a blowout. Let's start with you, Anthony, on this. What are your thoughts on the governor's race?
I want to say I was shocked, but I think she had a good chance because of the climate that we all believed was going to happen. As you can see, I have my Ashley Kalis yard sign behind me. I love Ashley. She's a great person. She was a great candidate. At the end of the day, I think that she wasn't from here was one of the most deciding factors in this race. She killed every debate she was in, especially the one you were moderator. Yeah, great job, by the way.
Thank you.
Yes.
Moderator up there.
Thank you.
I think she did wonderful. I think she ran a great campaign. She had a great staff, amazing staff. I worked very closely with each and every single one of them. I can't say enough good things about her, but at the end of the day, she was not from here. And I think that is what hurt her. And she's not going anywhere. Okay. Ashley's not leaving the state. I've been hearing people saying, is she going to leave? She's staying in Rhode Island right now. She's renovating her house in Newport. She's just came back from a fishing trip in Florida. Trust me, she's going to be vocal in the state of Rhode Island. And I wouldn't be surprised if she takes another go at it in the future.
I think that's a perfect way to segue David into this. What's your thoughts on the governor's race?
Yeah, I think Anthony can testify to this, but we spoke, on the phone a little bit before the governor's race, and I was saying, like, I get that there is some enthusiasm for Kalis, and that Republicans in the state think that it might be, the first time that they can put a dent in the Democratic machine. But at the end of the day, McKee cleaned up. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, like Anthony alluded to, she's not from Rhode Island. But it's not only that. There are a lot of people that, aren't born and raised in Rhode Island that have a part in this state. It's the fact that she kind of recently moved here, didn't really know the fundamentals about, municipal bureaucracy, or just like the ins and outs of a lot of things in this state enough to, make being governor her entry level job. It was it wasn't particularly close, but she did get her, close to 40%, which is as much as, any other Republican can get. And as far as the debates go, I would agree that, she clearly looked like a better performer in those debates, but that doesn't necessarily translate to people saying, oh, she performed better, I'm going to vote for her, or I have doubts about McKee. You know what I mean? We're a very polarized country. And at the end of the day, I don't think Kalis did enough to differentiate herself from, the generic Republican. She ran a more conservative campaign than even Alan Fung did. And, as much as I think Alan Fung struggled to get, a good grip of how to answer a lot of these questions like abortion and Social Security, I think she did even worse. I think, when it came to Donald Trump, she wouldn't even say if she voted for him or if she would support him again. Whether or not that pertains to a Rhode Island governor's race, we can have that argument, but it clearly made her look like she wasn't prepared for this sort of, questioning that was obviously going to be an aspect of this race, especially in Rhode Island. And, again, she with abortion, she said, oh, it's legal in Rhode Island, so I'm not going to do anything to stop it, but she wouldn't say whether or not she supported the actual Roe decision.
Anthony,
I would just say something real quick, Raymond, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say, even though she's not from Rhode Island, she was from New England. She grew up right in Massachusetts. Her husband's from Rhode Island, and they moved away, and they came back to see how corrupt and what a just terrible place to live Rhode Island really is. And I think she had real genuine intention to make Rhode Island into a better state. I think she there was nothing behind it. I think she just really had a love for Rhode Island and settling down, having her children in Rhode Island. She wanted to better our schools, our education. That was one of her major things. She wanted to be the education governor. And I think if she does stay in Rhode Island, I think she has a real chance of running for something else.
Speaking of, yeah, go ahead, and then I want to kind of segue into what you said.
I think, as much as we like to say we love Rhode Island, and as much as Republicans like to say, oh, we're going to make Rhode Island a great place to live, I think the average person who's not a particularly ideological person, when they see, someone who's never lived here come in and just start trashing everything about the state, they're like, yeah, I might not love everything about this state, but I'm not going to put someone who doesn't really have anything nice to say about our state in charge when I have a governor who's actually, maybe not perfect, but is clearly a cheerleader for our state in a way that Kalis never was and probably won't ever be.
Anthony, I'll give you a chance to respond.
There's much in the state to be too happy about, honestly. If I just moved into the state, there'd be a lot of things I would definitely say that's wrong. And I think Dan McKee, during one of the debates, he wouldn't even admit that he was being investigated by the FBI. He just said, one of his staffers, if I'm correct, he didn't want to talk about the FBI. He didn't want to even release the school testing until like 2 days before the election, when most of his base and independents already voted in early voting.
I do just want to. He said he himself didn't get subpoenaed, but the controversy was he wouldn't answer whether his administration got subpoenaed. I guess that'll be a good segue into the issues, because I was going to segue into like a minute ago. David, do you think the issues like the RICAS scores and the looming FBI investigation into the ILO contract had any impact?
No, not particularly. I mean, I noticed that every time I turn the radio on, every time I put a YouTube video on, every time I turn the TV on, the only thing I saw was, from the Kalis campaign was, attacks about not releasing the scores, or attacks about how Dan McKee is, the secret mafia mastermind, but, she lost by nearly 20 points. So clearly, that those issues that she made the pillar of her campaign were not nearly, convincing enough to, the average independent voter in Rhode Island, and certainly not for Democrats.
Well, David, I don't think she ever said that he was a mafia mastermind. The only mafia mastermind was someone on Joe Shekarchi's staff.
Right. Well,
oh boy,
I'm not going to get into that, but I'm not saying she literally said that. I'm saying that she used, the allegation of corruption to paint a picture of the governor that he was, this
Well, I
kind of
think that's pretty accurate.
reminiscent of the mafia in Rhode Island. But I'm saying that, despite all of her efforts to bring the governor down, it didn't convince, anyone who wasn't already voting for Republicans.
All right, Anthony,
Well,
final words, and then we'll go to Ryan.
Oh, thank you. I don't think she was too cruel on Dan McKee. I think she painted a pretty accurate picture of who he really is. I can't say on a personal level, but I do know he parks his car by homeless people every day. I've been to the State House and I talked to these people that he steps out of his car every day to see these homeless people just on the sidewalk. And I would honestly criticize one of his ads. Are you even from here? I know you've all seen that ad. If we launched that ad against Sabina, there would be outrage. I think that
what was Kayla's solution to homelessness? You say that she used all of these problems about Rhode Island, but what was her actual solution? I didn't see it.
All right. I'll let Anthony respond, and then I want to get Ryan in so we can.
Sorry, I'm getting a little.
No worries. By the way, just for full clarity, all four of us are good friends. We're all good friends out there. I promise. Anthony, go ahead. Last briefly.
Okay, so she never spoke out on what she would do about the homelessness. I am not Ashley Kalis, so I can't answer about what she would have done. And I don't think Dan McKee, who is the governor right now, has done anything for the homelessness or the people that he steps by every day that are beneath him. Literally, I've seen the tents. I've talked to these people. I've shaken their hands. They're there. They're real, and they're actual people. They weren't props for any political agenda. They're actually pissed Rhode Islanders that are homeless because of the economy, because of just Rhode Island itself. It's a hard place to live. Gas prices are rising. The hope of home ownership is out of reach for many Rhode Islanders. And I don't think Dan McKee's staff administration has done much to help these people.
Ryan?
Yeah, I think this shows that both of the candidates had flaws, and I think that's why this race was even thought to be a little bit close. Now there were rumors that Kalis had gotten within a few points of McKee just before Election Day, and I'm sure there were some people that were impressed by maybe her talking points during the debate. But at the end of the day, McKee had bigger concerns when it came to the Democrat primary, and I think obviously we know how that turned out. He won by about half a point compared to 20-ish here. So clearly, Kalis not being from here, I heard that out when I was having conversations with people, even Republicans. That was a turnoff for them. And the fact that she moved to Rhode Island just in March, and there was so much confusion about, does she have a second home here or does she pay taxes there? That was a flaw with Sarah Morgenthau too, in the, a Democratic primary for Congress. That's just regardless of party affiliation, clearly those candidates were heard, and Morgenthau's another conversation for another day, but you can still apply that same logic. But I think the Democrat primary helped McKee because, he learned, what to say and how to address the criticism. So he was ready for Ashley Kalis when, she was ready for him. And, they certainly ran at it. It went at it. It got personal. And at the end of the day, Rhode Island is still a blue state, especially that first congressional district is very liberal. And I think Republicans need to know their audience, condemn Donald Trump, do all these things. The reality is the president probably not likely in a gubernatorial race. But if I were on her team, I would say in a debate, you just, want to say as many bad things as you can about him, because, that is going to look good to maybe the more average, undecided, uneducated voter.
Governor was just one of the many statewide races on that ballot. There were two that went under the radar, but were kind of talked about as going to possibly be closer. And some of the results surprised me a bit. For example, Lieutenant Governor and Treasurer are the two I'm talking about. Anthony, what's your take on how Lieutenant Governor and Treasurer went?
I was very shocked about Lieutenant Governor. I know Aaron Gukian and his family. I went to school with his daughter Lauren Huff, his stepdaughter, and I was shocked. I honestly thought Sabina was going to do much better. Of course I'm glad Aaron did better, but I was shocked on the results. The treasurer, I was honestly shocked that Jim Laythorpe didn't win. He was much more qualified than his competitor, and James Diazo just had a scandal, as you know, about his travels to China and other places around the world. And Jim is a great candidate. He's a great person. I think he just didn't have the resources to put up as many ads as he did, and I think that was
And a point, I was on Lively Experiment recently to talk about these election results with Bob Walsh, who was formerly with NEARI, and Bill Bartholomew, who's host of the Bartholomew Town podcast. One of the things Bob brought up is that he said if he was helping your guys' campaign, he would have had a million of the about 5 million that Ashley spent dedicated to the down ballot candidates. Do you think that could have made a bit of a difference?
100%. I think that we should have. I think we had little finances that, not that we didn't have enough. I think if we had more, of course, we definitely could have put more out, done better. I think we should have put more money into Jim Laythorpe for treasurer. I think the lieutenant governor, I didn't even think that we could flip that, to be totally honest. Or attorney general, of course. Chaz was a great candidate, but I didn't think we had a chance of winning that seat. I honestly thought we had more of a chance with Alan Fung, Ashley Kalis, and Jim Laythorpe.
David, anything you want to add on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was a little shocked that Lieutenant Governor Matos only won by under 10 points. I'm not particularly shocked that Dioza was one of the worst performing Democrats, just because of how as a Democrat, I did vote for Dioza, but I was, I didn't think Laythorpe would win, but I always thought he would perform better than some of the other Republicans just because of his record and his more moderate stance. But I think it shows, these candidates like Aaron Gukian and James Laythorpe were the more kind of less covered, but clearly more moderate, more average, everyday Rhode Island value type Republicans that, did dig into that support that Democrats usually get. So maybe if Republicans kind of gave up on the governor's race this year, because they were never going to win that, if they had just ceded that to Democrats and used the vast majority of their resources on Laythorpe and Gukian, we might have seen really close races there. I'm kind of glad that they focused a lot on the governor's race. And McKee's coattails really dragged across Matos and Dioza. But it's definitely a case study in campaigning.
I also want to point out how late that we found out who the candidates were going to be. And what I mean by that is, to Ryan's point, he talked about how CD1, you have a lot of the hardcore Democratic voters that you have to appeal to alongside the conservative voters in CD2. If you're going to run and it's automatically an uphill, you kind of want at least a year out, especially if it's a statewide office. We didn't know who the governor candidate was on the GOP side until I believe it was January. That's what they had said on Lively when I was there. It was a little bit later than typical. And then it was even later for us to find out that Aaron was going to run and that Jim was going to run. I remember covering one of the kickoff events for a candidate on the GOP ticket, and they still hadn't had the treasurer candidate announced yet. And I mean, I knew who it was because I saw them and talked to them and talked about scheduling an episode for an interview once they announced, but not a lot of people knew who was running for the office at the time. David, do you think an early start could have had any more benefits?
Almost certainly. I mean, especially with Laythorpe and Aaron Gukian, but the early start is probably what also got Dioza the Democratic nomination. I remember thinking that the treasurer's race for the primary was undercovered, but Diosa announced very earlier than Stephen Pryor did. And Pryor really kind of surged at the last couple of weeks of the campaign. But I think so many people had known about Diosa that they were like, I'm going to stick with him. Same could be applied where if Lathrop had, announced a year earlier and had already been, like going through North Kingstown, South Kingstown, all those kind of like suburban areas that are, socially liberal, but maybe a little more fiscally conservative, and tried to hammer his message home that, okay, you might want to vote for every other Democrat, on the ticket, but I'm the one who's going to be, focusing on the pension, and you want someone who's really qualified to do that. He wasn't doing that as early as he needed to. And I think he underestimated the strength that unions have in the state and how they all got behind Diosa during the primary and during the election. And I know that Lathrop got, a couple employee unions, but Diosa had all the big ones. He had the National Education Association. He had the SEIU. He had the AFL-CIO. He had like all the ones that are really like, important for workers and have been part of the politics of our state for so long.
I just want to get Ryan in on this. Ryan, what did you think about the other statewide races that kind of went under the radar?
Well, Raymond, I think you and I were on Bill Bartholomew's podcast, and I was the one who kind of said, when he asked about, these statewide races and if Republicans had a chance, and again, it goes back to my point, and I know people are going to get tired of hearing this, but we're a blue state, and you're running statewide. I agree that all Republicans should have announced earlier. And I think the party took probably a different approach this year by, picking candidates who maybe were not as well known and didn't have any baggage necessarily associated with them, with the exception of Ashley Kalis, obviously. But it also shows that Matos and Diosa both had divisive primaries in the sense that, they had, plenty of people opposing them who were Democrats. But at the end of the day, name recognition was huge. And I do agree that the party itself definitely should have put more money into those down ballot races. And I know it's been going around on Twitter and other platforms over these past couple of weeks that, Ashley Kalis got just as much of the vote as the Secretary of State candidate, Pat Cortellesa, did. But she spent, I think, like $5 million and he spent like 5,000 respectively. So, that's what it came down to. But I hope that Lathrop and Gukian run again. And, I think, again, if these candidates go at it one more time and learn from their mistakes, they could have a shot.
Before we go into General Assembly, which I'll have Ryan will moderate that one. Ryan, you and I love the General Assembly races. We covered that to the T. But I just want to ask one quick follow up to Anthony, and then I'll Ryan, you could just start us off for General Assembly. So
Sure.
A point that I seen on Twitter with the wealth that Kalis has, is there a potential for her to invest in the party so you can have more financial resources moving forward in like 2024, 2026?
Before I answer that, I would just like to make a quick point about the about what we were just talking about.
Yep.
You're going to be surprised. We're going to have some announcements about candidates, not even statewide, but general election, the GA, about who's going to be running again. There's going to be some announcements. Some of the candidates want to run again. And I think it wouldn't have hurt anyone, honestly, to announce their candidacy a little bit earlier. I think one of the biggest flaws with the Kalis campaign was just trying to get her name out there. Last year, if I asked you last November who Ashley Kalis was, you would have no idea who she was. I think if she started a little bit earlier, it definitely would have helped because she was just trying to get her name mid the election. So I think she should have had more time to talk about her policies and not trying to get her name a household name in Rhode Island would have helped her campaign. And to answer your following question about her money, I think she will invest money. Personally, I can't speak on behalf of the party.
Right.
But my prediction is she will be helping party candidates, especially I think maybe her running mate, Aaron Gukian.
I think now is the time to let's start talking some General Assembly races. Ryan, this is probably the best part of election analysis because there's quite a bit to cover.
Yeah, and it's also a void that you and I, Raymond, have tried to fill with our Senate District 35 debate between incumbent Senator Bridget Valverde and challenger Republican Dorian Costa, who was a former state representative. And that was for, again, District 35 and parts of North Kingstown, East Greenwich, and South Kingstown. But I want to start with that one because I think that, well, first of all, we did a debate for it and it's my Senate district, but it kind of illustrates where, you know, some of these suburbs are heading in terms of being more socially liberal. And, you know, pre-Trump, you know, obviously Dorian Costa was a Republican representative for NK and Exeter. And there's no doubt that, you know, these places have some conservative pockets, but it was pretty much a Democratic sweep where I am here in NK. So, you know, obviously we don't need to spend a ton of time on each of these individual races, but I'll just keep this one open. If anyone wants to jump in on what they thought here? I mean, I thought it would be close, and it was. I think it ended up being, don't quote me, but about 54 to 46%. So again, Dorian Costa was out there on election day. She was engaging with the voters, and she's very approachable and charming. But at the end of the day, you know, it just came down to those districts, or to that Senate district in particular, being more Democratic.
Yeah, I think I know that, like, for Alana DeMario and for Bridget Valverde, like those two kind of similar districts that Republicans had hopes of flipping, I think both incumbent Democratic senators ended up outperforming their 2020 margins, even in this, you know, supposedly red-leaning year. So it is showing that, like, the trends are really just not going in the way that Republicans need them to in South County. And it wasn't just those two districts. I mean, you know, there were Democratic incumbents that were challenged for the first time in several cycles this year in South County, like you know, Judiciary Chairman Bob Craven, Representative Casimiro, Representative Fogarty, Representative Tanzi, and everyone was thinking, oh, you know, this is the year that old New England Republican Party kind of comes back. But none of these candidates did well. I mean, you know, the 20, 15, 20, 30-point losses across the board. And it goes to the fact that, you know, I know, Anthony, you're saying that, you know, you guys are really trying to recruit candidates, and, you know, even some of them might be announcing soon that they're going to run again. But just because you have a lot of candidates doesn't mean that they're all going to win. And quality over quantity is really important in Rhode Island. You guys had the most amount of Republican recruitment that you've seen since like 2004, but you lost seats in the House of Representatives and you were even in the Senate. So clearly it didn't work out too well for Republicans.
Go ahead, Anthony.
Well, to say about the loss that we did have, it was Blake Filippi's seat who was not seeking re-election, so we did lose the seat. And Justin Price's seat has not been called because he did call for a recount.
Well, they just
no, the recount.
Yeah,
The recount is done. I have not heard that.
No worries.
Price still lost.
And he lost.
Yeah, it was official yesterday, I believe.
Oh, I didn't even see that. Well, I think Price had some issues of his own. I won't speak ill of anyone from my party, but I think we all know what hurt him in the end, the January 6th and other things. David as pages and Ryan as pages, I think we've all seen how he is in the House, and I think that might have hurt him, especially you know. So I think in 2024 that seat will flip because it is a red area. I just think we need a good candidate. And to speak upon what you said about quality over quantity, we are already trying to seek the best candidates for each. Our goal is to try to have a candidate for each House and Senate seat, and we're already starting. We're trying to have the best candidate that we can. A lot of the candidates did well. I would like to actually say about Dana Traversi, who is running in District 23 against Joseph Shikarchi, the speaker. Dana got 40% vote, and he spent next to nothing compared to Joe Shikarchi. I don't know the exact amount. Joe Chikarchi spent a lot of money compared to Dana, and Dana got 40% of the vote.
But
I
that's
think
still
that
a landslide loss.
I'm
All
sorry.
right,
What was
hold on, David, let him finish. We don't want to do as many interruptions. Go ahead, Anthony.
I think that was just showing that about that race, that there was a chance if Dana announced earlier. He announced, I think, a month before the deadline was. He announced like in June or May. So I think if he had more time to prepare, more time to fundraise, he could have had a real shot of getting Chikarchi's house seat. And of course, Chikarchi had the upper hand as being the Speaker of the House and having more financial support than Dana did have. Another seat that I would like to talk about was Amanda Blau's seat, who ran a phenomenal campaign. I know I don't even think David could say that she didn't, because she was a phenomenal candidate, absolutely crushed Caldwell in the debate. I don't know if you guys watched the debate, but she crushed Caldwell, and Caldwell was almost crying in the debate, to be totally honest. And I was very shocked about that race, how it ended.
Yeah, I figured that one would flip, to tell you the truth, because of Blau, and I figured, Rep Caldwell, sponsoring the bill about the high capacity magazines would, really bother a lot of voters, because that was probably one of the most hated bills for the Republicans this year, which was the package of gun bills. But I think that one in particular really ruffled people's feathers. But again, maybe it goes back to that socially liberal, fiscally conservative mindset that East Greenwich and surrounding areas had. The other thing I will say is that, back to House District 39, I was actually at a birthday party today in Hopkinton, and that's a lot of people were in that district and talking about that race, and there's excitement for Megan Cotter. I think regardless of your political affiliation, she's definitely a charming person who wants to work with everyone. She has a really interesting life story, and she's been through a lot, to say the least. And of course, Price had his issues as well. But then the other problem was, they had an independent who leaned more, conservative, to my understanding. So that seat certainly could flip. And, just because the district is so rural and red, and because of that, because you had two Republicans in there, or people who leaned more Republican, they kind of, evened each other out, and now we have Rep-elect Cotter officially. But any thoughts on that race in particular, Ray or David?
I'll let David go first because I know he wants to respond.
Well, I mean,
Of course.
Specifically with Amanda Blau, I mean, she clearly ran probably one of the better Republican campaigns for the General Assembly, but Caldwell is clearly a very popular figure in East Greenwich, and that's the vast majority of the district. And I think that helped her. But, when you're talking about running a candidate in every seat, I don't know if that's the best path. I know I'm a Democrat, but if I'm going to give advice to Republicans, I'm not thinking, oh yeah, we need a candidate for every rep seat in Providence, and we need a candidate for every Senate seat in Pawtucket. Like, if you had a third of the candidates, right, but the same amount of money, and you sent all that money to Amanda Blau instead of sending, money to someone who's running against, Senator Mack in Providence, you're probably going to do better in East Greenwich or in that district. You know what I mean? So it really is about, we've said it so many times, but quality over quantity. It's one thing to register, put your name on the ballot. It's another thing to get close to winning. And I don't think that, the messaging of the Republican Party in Rhode Island is something that people are buying in the vast majority of the state. And I also don't think that, the candidates themselves were doing, the work that they needed to do to convince Democrats, because that is the majority of our state, to finally split their ticket.
I'll respond, Raymond.
Yeah, go ahead, and then I actually want to touch upon the battlegrounds, but I'll let you respond.
Yeah. I would just like to say that recruiting candidates, that is not the Rhode Island Republican. That's not what they're trying. That's honestly just personally me. I'm trying to recruit candidates for for every seat. That's not the entire Rhode Island Republican Party, just to clarify on that. And for Amanda Blau's race, I would just like to say Caldwell did not work for it at all. During the entire summer, she was at the beach club with her kids. She didn't work nearly as hard as she should have. And even during the debate with her and Amanda Blau, she didn't even mention once West Greenwich. She does not mention that she represents West Greenwich. If you live in West Greenwich, you go to Sherry Roberts for help. They don't go to Justine Caldwell. Justine Caldwell is only popular in East Greenwich, and that is the only reason why she's elected. And she doesn't help West Greenwich at all. So I hope that in 2024, if Amanda Blau does decide to run again, which I sincerely hope she does, she's a wonderful candidate, and she runs a campaign like she's run for Congress. When she had people canvassing for her, she has packs of like 50 of her palm cards, and she has a little note on how to canvass, which I found funny. It's like, step back. If person's talking to you, step back. I was like, what if they don't come out? Do I still step back? I was making fun of her a little, but she's wonderful, and I hope she runs again.
To talk about some of the battlegrounds, because some of the districts that Ryan, David, and Anthony mentioned are some of the ones that I was paying attention to. So House 39, now former Rep. Justin Price's seat that he held before this election, that's a red area, so that's going to likely be a battleground for 2024's election cycle, because it's in Richmond, right, Anthony?
Yes, it is.
It's in Richmond, which, it's more of a conservative area in Hopkinton, as well as another.
Oh,
area
100%.
so those are more conservative areas. Is Exeter in that district too? My geography.
Most of it.
I don't think it is.
96% of it is, yes.
So
I thought it was.
Casimiro has a little bit of
4%. Yep.
Oh,
So to my point, exactly, it's more of a conservative seat. So that's definitely one that I, without a doubt, think that the Rhode Island GOP are going to look at. And just for full clarity for the results, there were two seats, one in the House, one in the Senate, that the Republicans picked up, but it was offsetted by losing Senate 38, which was Senate Minority Leader Dennis Algier's seat, and House 36, which was House Minority Leader Blake Filippi's seat. But the ones that they gained also were interesting too. So House 53 was the House pickup. Brian Rea and Bernard Hawkins, they had their 2020 rematch. This time, now Rep-elect Rea came out victorious. It was a close one in 2020 that he instantly wanted to run for it again. I remember the party chair telling me back in January on the show that was one on their target list. House 21 too. David, you and I have we had our own thoughts on this. I think that Marie Hopkins ran a phenomenal campaign in terms of work rate, messaging, and just the fact is that she was one of the first GA candidates I remember announcing in a competitive seat, and she only lost by 20 something. It was a very close election, like I think 20 something votes. Rep. Camille Wilkinson ended up winning by, which is one of her closest elections ever. She even acknowledged on Facebook when Marie gave her the concession gift of the handwritten note, and I think it was also a cigar too. So that one, I think that one's also going to be on the radar for 2024. It might be a little bit different since the national environment's bluer, but if Marie runs again, the name recognition is already there. What other seats am I thinking of? Oh, Senate 29. That one surprised me a bit. I thought it was going to be a bit closer, but Tony DeLuca pulled it off and ended up winning. Granted, the more establishment and centrist Democrats were putting on negative literature against Jennifer Rourke, the Democratic nominee. But I think that one's going to be another battleground too. And I just have two more seats. Both of the Johnston seats, House 42 and I believe House 43, Rep. Eddie Cardillo and Rep. Deb Filella, respectively. Both of those were a little bit closer than I thought. I mean, granted, they're in Johnston. Johnston has a lot more Democrats that voted for Trump. But I mean, if both of those candidates came that close and they were first-time candidates, they might be running again, and it might be two races to watch. I don't know what you think on that, David, but it's kind of what I end up getting.
For Johnson specifically, I mean, I have a little bit different of a take. I mean, Ed Cardillo is only running for a second term, and he barely won in 2020. It was like a 1-point race. He actually outperformed his 2020 margin. So maybe in a bluer 2024 year, Johnston might be, a very hospitable place for statewide Republicans and for Republican presidential candidates. But on the local level and on the state assembly level, I don't think that Republicans have done enough to, stop a lot of these conservative Democrats from getting elected. And, a similar argument could be made for Rep. Vela Wilkinson. See, what is that, 22 you said?
21.
21. So yeah, I mean, that race was close, but Rep. Vela Wilkinson is, I think she's an incredible representative. The vast majority of people who live in that district know who she is. They can pick up the phone, she'll answer, she has excellent constituent services, and it was still close. And I think that might just be because, Marie Hopkins is a Republican, probably a little bit more moderate than the average Republican, but Rep. Vela Wilkinson is a conservative Democrat. So you have a conservative Democrat versus a moderate Republican, not a huge gulf between these candidates. So I don't think that it's not like where, you have an extremely progressive Democrat running against a conservative Republican, like you see in a lot of elections outside of Rhode Island. So I think the fact that they were so similar maybe made people say, maybe I'll give a Republican a shot this time. But still, at the end of the day, just like so many of the General Assembly races, people stuck with the Democrat.
She did have a bit of a nail biter in the primary, though. Do you see that potentially being one that if the co-op still goes for 2024, that they're gonna definitely run Capri again?
Well, I don't know if the co-op is going to be a functioning, thing in 2024.
Let's just say generic progressive. In terms of like ideology, just another progressive Dem.
Yeah, no, clearly, I remember Capri losing was one of my surprises. I expected her to do a little better. It was still very close, but I think there are a lot of areas where, the more moderate or conservative Democrats survived this year, but maybe next year with higher turnout, a progressive candidate could do pretty well. And Vela Wilkinson's district certainly is an example of that.
I think that Camille, she's certainly moderate, which is always a challenge because you face opposition from both ends of the spectrum, and she did have formidable candidates in both the primary and the general, and I learned despite the co-ops implosion this go around, Capri Catanzaro was, I believe, Janine Calkin's campaign manager and worked for a lot of other progressives in Warwick, so she wasn't a no name, and she knew what she was doing in terms of the campaign stuff. But I think that I did hear that Camille Vela Wilkinson did not door knock. I don't know about her constituent services. It's tough to tell, not being in Warwick. I think Johnston, maybe Cardillo's seat is a little bit more vulnerable than Valella's, just based on the overall quantity of the representative, but it's tough to tell, again, not being kind of on the ground, living in that area. But it's definitely kind of the opposite effect of maybe South County was, where those people like Trump and candidates further up the ballot do better than those down the ballot. And then lastly, District 53 for the House, I think Bernie Hawkins, certainly not the most accessible representative. I think most Democrats could tell you he was not the best, and I don't know much about Brian Rea, but it sounds like based on kind of personality and passion that he won, and I wish the best for him, of course, as I do every candidate.
Anthony, you want to get last word? I know you wanted to say something a second ago.
Yes, I just wanted to talk about Greg Constantino's race in, where was it, District 44. I thought Peter Trezaluzzi was going to win. Even Gregor Constantino, the same day of election, said that his seat was in danger, and he admitted it. I thought that his seat would have honestly flipped, mostly because he was an absentee representative for last year. I do know he did have a back surgery, so I understand why he wasn't there, so I don't hold that against him at all. But I think that definitely would have hurt him a little bit more. I think it was the year to take his seat. I'm remiss that we didn't, and I think it definitely was the best year too, just because of that. And going back to Marie Hopkins' race, I think one of the reasons she did not win was because of a chair from the Rhode Island Republican Party that no longer, he stepped down. He endorsed Vela Wilkinson. And I think that might have been the reason. And I think that put her over the edge other than Marie Hopkins. And Megan Cotter, I'm happy to talk to her during sessions, and I'm looking forward to talking to her and just seeing where she is, because I have heard she's a little progressive, which I'm afraid of as a Republican. But even Anastasia Williams, who David knows, I love Rep. Williams. She is one of my favorites. She's top 5 right next to Blake Filippi and Chippendale. I absolutely love her, but she lost her primary to David. You did an episode with him. What was his name? Could you remind me? I forget.
Oh,
Enrique Sanchez.
You said David. I was like, wait, David's got a podcast?
No, I wish I had a podcast as successful as you, Ram.
Yeah. It was Enrique Sanchez. I had him on. If you want, once you're done, I'll add something to that, because that was my most interesting state house district to watch this election year.
I loved it. Loved your podcast. That was a great episode.
Thank you.
I think he's definitely more progressive than Anastasia Williams, who was definitely very progressive. One of the most progressive representatives in the House, some could argue, next to Morales and Henry's. But I definitely think that it's going to be interesting to see him work with Morales and all the other co-op representatives in the House.
Just to clarify, Morales isn't in the co-op.
He isn't?
No, he's not.
Yeah,
I could've sworn he was.
Sanchez.
Neither is Sanchez. But just to wrap up the General Assembly topic, and nice bone, we'll go local and then 2024 onward. So all politics is local, to simply put. If you're running a General Assembly race, and I hope this doesn't sound cheesy, especially since we got 3 legislative pages who'll probably know more of the ins and outs than I do, but a lot of it does boil down to a combination of candidate quality and knocking on the doors. I live in House District 9. And granted, my rep, every time my former rep at this point, Rep. Anastasia Williams, whenever I called, she picked up the phone, but she never came to my door this election cycle, which, I'm totally sympathetic to reasons why, and totally understanding. But to put into perspective, Enrique Sanchez, who was running as the underdog, he put in a lot of work, and I mean, this is the first time I've ever had a candidate come to my house 5 times in an election campaign. That, I don't know if you've ever had a candidate come to your house 5 times, but every time, there'd be sometimes I would be walking out my house to go to the grocery store, and I see him knocking on the door down my street. He really put in the work. And the district, Providence is going to have a lot more Democrats, and granted, they're going to lean more progressive as demographics shift and the electorate becomes more younger and progressive. But he just worked really hard, to put simply. I think the local angle is a good way to pivot into some local analysis, because aside from CD2, CD1, governor, lieutenant governor, general assembly, even some mayoral elections, there were ballot referendums, and how these results went kind of create questions for what's going to happen in some cities and towns moving forward. So I'll start with Providence. The ballot question for the hybrid school board, half elected and half mayor appointed, passed with flying colors, about 72%, which surprised me a little bit, because you had the current mayor, the mayor-elect, and the former mayors rallying against it. So I thought, and I was also hearing that parts of Providence had lower turnout, so I thought the more energized voters who were likely probably going to oppose it would have voted against it. But anyways, that aside, so now 2024 is the first election where half of the school board members will be elected, and it's broken into regions like north, east, south, southwest for the city. It's equivalent to the size of 3 city council wards. So that's going to be, something interesting to focus on. And David, you probably know what the other city or town I'm looking at for moving forward. I'll let you take it over on that end.
Oh, well, for Cranston, it was, interesting, but also not that interesting at the same time. It's interesting in the fact that, the Democrats kept their majority. And it's not because they kept all the seats they won in 2020. It's because in 2020, there was residents of Cranston elected a narrow majority of Republicans, but one of the Republicans flipped to the Democrats, and that Republican that's now a Democrat was also reelected last week. I think it's probably just due to the fact that because Alan Fung only won Cranston by 3 points, his coattails were not nearly as big as they usually are for other Republicans in the city. But there weren't that many interesting ballot referendums. The only things we had were like, changing the charter to allow email to be used to summon, counselors. So we didn't have any like, oh, we're changing the term limits, or we're changing, the salary of the elected officials. Nothing like particularly impactful, like, changing from an appointed school board to a hybrid school board, which, I know I'm not from Providence, but I did pay a good amount of attention to that. I wasn't surprised that it passed. I was surprised that it passed with such a large majority. And I'm also surprised that, so many of the mayors made an effort to be against it. It's not, a surprise that, okay, yeah, they're probably not for it, considering that they're losing a power. They're losing the power to fully appoint, all the members of the school board. But if I'm Brett Smiley, I'm thinking, okay, it's going to pass. It could pass narrowly. It could pass strongly. But why am I, not even being the mayor yet, already going against something that is likely to happen? You know what I mean? So off the bat, he didn't have a primary. He didn't have a general election opponent, and he won the primary by a couple points. So you're not like this guy who's coming in with 60, 70, 80% of support. Maybe that wasn't the best choice for him to go against it, or the best choice for every other former mayor, but they don't have to face the electorate in Providence again. So
Cranston didn't have the ballot referendums. I should have prefaced it a little better. Cranston, that one fits in the case of how the results. Interesting question for 2024. Before we go on to that, Anthony, was there anything that stood out to you for local races or ballot referendums?
Well, my local race wasn't too exciting, other than the GA. Of course, Jessica Drudet was in my District 30, and I'm a personal friend of hers, so I was rooting for her. But for one of the questions, it was which I thought was a little interesting, was marijuana. Should we have local marijuana shops or something like that? And I voted no on it, just because I am against the usage of marijuana. Of course, I love the taxes it brings to the state. I don't think anyone should be using it other than medical uses. I think it alters the brain, and I think it's dangerous, just as dangerous as other drugs.
Ryan, was there anything interesting in NK going on for the election?
We had some really divisive local politics take place because of what has happened in our high school, which is a conversation for another day. But at the end of the day, we had a complete Democratic sweep of the town council and school committee. You had Mary Breimer lose her seat on the North Kingstown Town Council. She was a Republican who, really, I think, lost because of some allegations about cat litter and litter boxes in the local schools, which again is really hyper local. And again, I'm sorry if you don't live in North Kingstown, you probably don't understand. But I think people didn't like that, but also, there were many Republicans and independents who had a chance, and this definitely was competitive. But at the end of the day, it came down to ground game. The Democrats door knocked the most, and they kind of stood together as one, through the Democratic Town Committee, and as a result, won their races. We didn't have really any ballot referendums that were anything crazy. We did have the one about marijuana, and I believe it passed here, pretty easily. So that was it for NK. But I know some were surprised that it was a complete Democratic sweep.
Could I quickly go back to Cranston just really quickly?
Yeah, I was actually going to transition. What I was going to say was these local results make you question what are things going to look like in 2024. And David, in your neck of the woods in Cranston, I brought this up on Twitter. I'm surprised not more people are talking about it, but there's quite some questions about what's going to happen in Cranston. Is it going to be the battleground of battlegrounds in the next election?
Yeah, I mean, if my gut would tell me now, if Democrats were able to keep the council blue in 2022, which was a neutral to red leaning year, then I think with an increased turnout and Alan Fung not on, I don't think he's going to be on the ballot in 2024 in any way, shape, or form. I think Democrats are probably going to have a good year in Cranston, but as far as like the more divisive education issues this year, the school committee, just like North Kingstown, had a lot of candidates running on that kind of like anti-CRT, more like parental rights sort of platform. And just like in North Kingstown, I don't think a single one of them won in Cranston. So clearly, that sort of messaging works in certain parts of the country. I know it worked pretty well for like, Glenn Youngkin, who ran for governor of Virginia a couple of years ago or last year or whatever. But maybe in 2022 and in Rhode Island, that sort of, very, disruptive kind of like in your face anger is not going to translate to getting elected to school boards in Rhode Island.
Do you have any takes for the mayoral race? That one's going to be one that I'm for sure going to keep my eye on.
Yeah, I mean, I know that Hopkins, as I think you said, he is running for re-election. I think he'd be a formidable candidate. I, as a Democrat, am sympathetic to him on a lot of issues, including education. I don't think he's as popular as, nearly as popular as Alan Fung was. So I don't think he's a safe bet for re-election, but it all depends on what the turnout is, what the electorate looks like in 2024, and who Democrats nominate against Hopkins. I think Democrats have a huge bench of excellent candidates in Cranston. We have, the likely next council president, Jessica Marino. We have John Donegan, who is an excellent, very progressive, very, energetic counselor. He also might be the president. I don't know. It's going to be between, Jessica Marino or John Donegan. We have some excellent state reps. So the Cranston Democratic Party, I think, is definitely on the upswing, considering how well we did on the council and how close we got Seth Magaziner to winning Cranston in this election.
And that's why I say it's a battleground, because before this, you would think Cranston's the last Republican stronghold because Hopkins won by quite a bit. And, although it was narrow, the Republicans did keep their council majority. But in 2024, one of those council seats, Ward 5, Councilman Papalowskis, is term limited. Is that something analysts should be looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Ward seat is a Biden seat. So it's one of those areas where I think it narrowly went to Biden, but people split their tickets. They voted for I always have trouble saying it. Papalowskis, I think.
Papalowskis.
Yeah. So he's not going to be up. I think that is going to be a key indicator of whether Democrats maintain or even expand their majority. So I think that, I think you're right. That's going to be a very close battleground seat in a state where there isn't a lot of battlegrounds.
And speaking of 2024, that's the next election cycle everybody's looking at. When we're taping this, former President Donald Trump has announced he's running in 2024. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is being talked about as a potential rival to him in the primary, but then there's a few other Republicans in the background. Then on the Democratic side, there's talks of, will President Biden run for re-election? He said he plans to, but he is up there in age. I'll start with you, Anthony. What do the Republicans do? And you can take national and local both into the conversation. What goes on in 2 years? What do they got to do?
Okay, so the announcement of former President Trump, I think it was definitely the wrong timing, especially with the Herschel Walker runoff election. I think it's definitely going to hurt that runoff election. I think he should have waited if he was going to. And I honestly do not think Ron DeSantis will run against Trump, because I know Trump is a fight. He is fiery. He will destroy DeSantis in a debate. And I don't think Republicans, we don't need that. We don't need DeSantis looking weak in a debate, because I do see DeSantis running for president in the future. I just don't think it's his time to shine right now. And I think just look at Marco Rubio. His opponent, I forget her name, excuse me.
Val Demings, Congresswoman Demings.
Yep.
Congresswoman Demings. Sorry, I can't get the name now.
Don't worry. She used Trump's attacks in an ad against Marco Rubio, little Marco. But I think that would be against Ron DeSantis. So I think it would be honestly in his best interest to sit this one out. Personally, I love President Trump. We've all had conversations in private. You know my opinions on him. I just think in Rhode Island, it would be in our best interest to stay away from him as far as we can, to rebrand ourselves. And I think that's what we are doing in this election. When voters went and asked me, do you guys stand with President Trump? I would always say Trump is not on the ballot this year. Trump is a distraction. We're trying to focus more on Rhode Island. We're not trying to bring Trump into the conversation. And quite honestly, he has nothing to do with the Rhode Island Republican Party.
He's now going to be on the ballot though, so it's going to be a heck of a fight to try to distance.
It is, and I'm not in leadership like that.
Right. Well,
so I can't speak on how they will be handling this, but I think for their best interest, we should leave him alone.
David?
Yeah, I mean, just like how you just said, if Trump had I think it's inarguable that Trump had a huge impact on why Republicans didn't do really well nationally and in Rhode Island. So try doing that in 2024 when he may very well literally be on the ballot. But I actually agree with you, Anthony. I'm not convinced that that DeSantis runs.
First time of the episode.
Yeah, well, no, believe it or not, Anthony and I agree on a lot. We just don't want to show it in the interview. But
Right.
but I maybe not for every reason that Anthony thinks, but if I'm Ron DeSantis, right, and I see that Donald Trump's running for president, right, there's no scenario for DeSantis, whether he wins against Trump or loses against Trump, that ends well for him. Because let's say Trump continues his run and DeSantis announces sometime in the near future. DeSantis either loses to Trump, which hurts his, career and makes him a loser, right? He beats Trump, and Trump is going to be, he'll never let that down. We know that, he's going to do everything possible to make sure that DeSantis suffers for beating him. So
He'll create the Patriot Party.
yeah. So you either lose to Trump or you beat him, and he never lets you forget it. So I don't think that 2024 is a great year for DeSantis to run in the Republican primary, even though he clearly would be more electable than Trump and has a better understanding of where the Republican Party needs to move, even though I'm not a huge fan of him.
I think that
Go ahead, Ryan.
I think that, the more unified any party is around, a candidate, the better, which is definitely going to be a struggle for, the Republicans coming up. And I can tell you Democrats definitely want to see, Trump, DeSantis, anybody else go at it, because, Democrats had, I think, 20 plus candidates at first, looking back at, I think, June 2019, I remember that, crazy debate where it was just so many you couldn't keep track. And then, of course, they all dropped out. And I know that, different situation, but people really thought Trump would win because of that. And, that didn't end up materializing for other reasons. But still, it's kind of the same effect, very similar to, Bob Lancia and Alan Fung this year, right? The Republican Party wanted to unify around one candidate. It goes back to Justin Price and the Independent. I mean, there are so many examples of this where, I think the Republicans definitely, are best, unifying with one candidate, and Trump has already announced right now. So we'll see what happens. I know DeSantis has rumored to be getting in, maybe Mike Pence, maybe others. So there's a lot to watch, and still plenty of time, of course, before the 2024 elections.
David,
I
go ahead.
I'm sorry. I would like to just clarify what I said before. It's not that I don't think he has a chance of winning nationally. I just think in Rhode Island, it would hurt us. It would set us back a little bit. I think we could recover from it. I just think it's going to be even more of a uphill battle with him on the ballot. It's not that we wouldn't have a chance of winning. It's just going to be a lot more work for us.
Yeah. But look at 2016. I mean, I think, the Republican Party is still trying to recover from, Trump being president for that time here in Rhode Island. And again, it goes back to kind of that, those suburbs such as, NK and EG, which have gone more blue.
David, you and I, we pay attention to ET, which is short for election Twitter, a lot, which is like this for those watching and or listening. election Twitter is like this community of people who are big into politics like us four, and they go at it on Twitter for elections, whether it's like creating a map, standing, which is like a super fan for those who aren't familiar with the term, of like candidates. For example, in Rhode Island, a lot of people were putting Mayor Fung as their profile picture with the laser eyes. It's some parts of it are silly, some parts of it could get toxic, but a lot of them are talking about the Senate races, David, in 2024, which it seems like the Democrats do not have a favorable map. They have the 2018 map, which has seats like Montana, Ohio, West Virginia, which all Democrats have. Granted, they're blue dogs / moderate Democrats, but if you have Trump at the top of the ticket, and he swept those states twice, what happens to the Democrats in 2024?
Yeah, I'll start by saying, I mean, that 2024 map has never been good for Democrats. It wasn't good for us in 2018. It's not going to be good for us in 2024. However, despite the fact that Trump did, win a lot of those states like Ohio, Montana, Florida, Texas, I don't know if he has like that same, juice that he had in 2016 and 2020. I think that, with Trump at the top of the ticket, my assumption is that should Biden run for re-election, he wins and probably outdoes his 2020 margin against Trump by a little bit. But the 2024 Senate race is going to be probably a knockdown, drag out, super close, but Republican favored election just because of how red those states are that Democrats have to run in. But, as we saw in 2022, candidate quality is really important. And, if, you try to run some, right wing or far right election denier candidate against even against like John Tester in Montana, the Democratic senator there, you could see, ostensibly leaning R or safe R seats becoming competitive for the Democrats. So if I were Republicans, I would be very weary and learn some lessons from this election and say, you know what, Trump is not good for us. Election denialism isn't good for us. Ignoring the abortion issue isn't good for us, and running on, privatizing Social Security is never going to work for us. So I'm optimistic about 2024 in the sense that if 2022 was this good, then 2024 has to be really good. But I am a little nervous about the Senate.
Is there anything? Oh, sorry.
Thank you for the feedback. I'll use that in 2024.
he was jotting down all the notes, and
I have a little notebook right now and a little pen and everything.
We're giving free. Hey, this is free advice and consulting services for the Republican Party from
Ryan. Nothing's free in life.
Well, it's not like they'll ever listen. The Republicans clearly didn't learn a lesson from 2018 or 2020. So why would they learn one from 2022?
I think we did. I think we learned a lesson from this midterm, and we're building back. And I'm not going to say better than ever, but I think you'll be surprised, David. We have some tricks up our sleeve. Not like that, but we're starting earlier. And
Ryan,
I think that's honestly going to help us.
As we said in the Senate 35 debate, whoever is correct in that bet / prediction should buy the other one dinner, and then Ryan and I will tag along for a quick follow up on those results. I'm going to end things a little bit differently. Aside from one more thing, and then we'll do what I like to do, which is a non-political topic at the end. I know it's a little bit of a throwing out of the loop for our conversation, but either any of you three, if you want to add in on this, is there anything in Rhode Island that we should be talking about in 2024 that we didn't cover yet? I know we have Senator Whitehouse up, but I mean, that might not be as competitive.
I think 2024, none of the, none of these statewide offices are on the ballot. Sheldon Whitehouse, I'm sure will get a Republican challenger. I know he's not well liked among conservatives, more than, a lot of other Democrats. So someone will run against him, and, they will probably get, 35 to 43% of the vote, I'm going to say. I don't know who it'll be. I'm sure someone will challenge Seth Magaziner as well. But I don't think there's anything major, just considering, you have the GA races, that are obviously all 113 seats, are only 2-year terms. And then you have obviously Senator Reid is good until 2026, and Whitehouse is up, and obviously Magaziner and Cicilline will be too. So nothing crazy, but the Republicans definitely should get to work now on finding good candidates who, and some of these GA, incumbents could be, very vulnerable. And, you certainly have places where you could, I'm sure, I can envision it now. In 2 years, people are going to be saying Seth Magaziner hasn't done much because he's the freshman from the, minority party in the House. So, a lot more to come on that. But
does CD2 get competitive? Either David or Anthony, if you want to chime in.
Yeah, I don't think, especially if in a red-leaning midterm with an excellent Republican candidate like Alan Fung, the fact that Seth Magaziner was able to win by 4 points spells that that's probably a safe Democratic seat in 2024.
I would disagree just because Roe versus Wade was just overturned. I think that was one of the biggest problems in this election, other than Republicans just simply did not get out and vote. I also think Democrats are significantly better at ballot harvesting than Republicans. I don't know why we haven't perfected that a little bit better. I think we have to catch up with the Democrats, but I don't know who would run against Seth Magaziner because I think Alan Fung was one of our strongest candidates. I will say Sheldon Whitehouse. I know who is going to challenge him. I won't say yet.
It's already been on Twitter. I'm sorry. I think I know who we're talking about. I'll say it off camera so we don't leak it if it hasn't been full.
Yeah, I don't want to leak it. I was talking to him earlier at Joe Powers' house, but I'm excited for him. I wish him the best. I will certainly, if I'm still in Rhode Island, I will help him. And I'm excited for 2024. I think it has a lot of promises, and I think Republicans, we're learning from our mistakes, and I think we're going to do better.
It's certainly going to be all four of our version of Christmas when November 2024 comes, and we're just putting on the news, waiting for the polls to close. I can't wait. I'm already excited. People kind of,
I am so excited.
yes,
people kind of
Me
look
too.
at me. They'll look at us and be like, oh, they're still talking about politics. But hey, I mean, politics continues to go. I mean, look, if you're in a state like Virginia or New Jersey, you're spoiled because you have an election year every single year, and Louisiana and Kentucky too, because they have the government.
I wish. I wish.
Yeah.
You should see me election night. I felt like a kid on Christmas Eve. I could barely excited.
You and I both, Anthony.
Yeah.
So it's tradition on Ray-ality TV to end things off away from politics. I'm going to use the famous question I like to ask everybody at the end. I know it's a bit of a surprise we didn't have it before, but I just want to end things away from politics. So I'll start with you, Ryan. In your opinion, what do you think Rhode Island is best known for?
I think we have to be best known for the opportunity that our blue economy brings. It's a topic. I'm sorry, I'm going to be a little bit political, but it's not talked about enough. The environment in general, but also our opportunities. So I think our to give kind of the boring but true example of the industry we have with seafood. I was just enjoying clam cakes and chowder today. So I think that's the easy answer. But we are truly known for our seafood. And we're a national leader in that. So and clearly that was shown with Joe McNamara at the Democratic Convention calling us the calamari comeback state. I know that was way back in 2020, but it still holds true that we're pretty known for that.
Anthony?
Not to be political, but definitely corruption. But on the unpolitical part, seafood. I think we're best known for our clam cakes and chowder. And I hope that doesn't end just because they want to put the wind turbines in the ocean.
David?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I would stick with food, but just the restaurant industry in Rhode Island, I think, is incredible. I think we give Massachusetts and New York a run for their money. I mean, we have excellent restaurants in Cranston, excellent Italian restaurants in Cranston, excellent restaurants of all different countries and cultures in Providence. If I'm in Boston and I walk into a random spot, it's much less likely that that's going to be amazing than if I walk in a random spot in Providence. You could go anywhere in Providence and probably get a good meal.
Yes, sir. I'll add on to this. This is the first time I've ever answered the question but I'm going to say a couple things. One, the fact that everything is so close and everybody knows each other, which, despite some of the negatives I'll have with people getting jobs in state government and living off of it for the rest of their life, it's still positive because David, you and I live practically like maybe 10 minutes away from each other. And Ryan, you're in NK and I'm in Providence. But, even though we think Rhode Islanders think 15 minutes more is a long drive, it's still relatively close compared to if I was in a rural area in Texas and had to drive all the way to Houston. And Anthony, we're not too far from each other either. The other one is coffee milk. I mean, it's delicious. We got to give love to that. And then third, that's a tie between Family Guy being set here and us being confused for somewhere in New York, aka they'll say Long Island, but it's Rhode Island for our non-Rhode Island listeners. I know I did say that was the last one, but since food was brought up, and I want to show love to Ryan's non-political topic that he asks everybody, we'll go with you first, Ryan. Again, what's your favorite restaurant in Rhode Island?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was debating if I should chime in there and ask, because yes, I do ask all elected officials this, and it really goes along with David's question. And I was afraid someone was going to ask me this at some point, because it's really hard. It really kind of depends on what what I'm in the mood for. But I will say, Cranston has a lot of great Italian restaurants, everything from Marchetti's to Cafe Eatery, and I know Chili's.
Antonio's.
Say that again?
Antonio's.
That's true. Yes, that one too. I know Chili's, which isn't as known, but very good. North Kingstown, we have a lot of good ones. Back 40. I have to show some love to my hometown. So, we have a Greg's here. I know that's a Rhode Island staple. It's just it's so hard to pick one. So thank you, but no thank you, Raymond, for asking me that.
We tried, no worries. We'll
Thanks,
ask it
David.
again another time. David, go ahead.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm glad we're ending on this because I'm very hungry. But my favorite restaurant has to be Persimmon in Providence, on the east side of Providence. They used to be in Bristol, and then they closed and moved to Providence. So like just awesome, like kind of tapas, tasting menu style thing. Excellent food, open kitchen, brilliant staff, brilliant cook. 10 out of 10 across the board.
Wow, I'll have to try it.
Yeah,
I love Twin Oaks, not just because Alan Fung had his watch party there, but another one of my favorites is Venda. And David, we actually went to Venda together once, and we had a really good lunch. I really enjoyed the Italian grinder.
Yes, that's a great place too.
He's really tuning in his Rhode Island accent. David, you're gonna have to step it up after this.
I'm born and raised Cranston. I don't have it. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, something. We'll figure it out. I guess I'll say Marchetti's. I like Marchetti's, to be honest. Not too bad. I'm in Providence. I don't know if we consider this a restaurant, but if I'm on Federal Hill, I'm always going to Caserta's, and I like Cecilia's as well. If we count those as restaurants, granted they're pizza joints, but I mean that's just me. I'm half Italian, and I got to go to the pizza right away.
They count.
Sounds good to me.
You're not eating Caserta. You ain't eating pizza.
Yes, sir. I'm glad. If you know, you know. I think that's the best place where we ended off. David, Anthony, thank you so much for joining both Ryan and I. Ryan, thank you so much for helping me moderate this and guide the conversation throughout the election cycle. And it's always a pleasure to be on your podcast too.
Yes, same here. My
pleasure. Where it could be found on Spotify, Spreaker, Apple. It's called Behind the Candidates. If you just Google search it, it'll pop up, one of the first things. And then if you're watching this on the YouTube version on Ray-ality TV, if you want to see future episodes on this channel, please click the subscribe button down below and the post notification bell icon to the right of it. And also click the follow button and the notification bell on Ryan's podcast pages as well. I'm Raymond Bakari. That's Ryan Lukowicz on the audio version for the Behind the Candidates. That's David Rudolph to my top left. Ryan's on the bottom left on the screen, and that's Anthony Anthony Delana on the bottom right. I'm Raymond Bakari. I'll see you on the next episode.